Good morning, church. It's good to be with you. I hope that you had a wonderful holiday weekend as we celebrated our 249th birthday as a nation. So I guess that means welcome to year 250. It has begun. My family went in 1976 to the nation's capital on July 4th. I was 7 years old, and I barely remember the 200th celebration. So I think it's time to celebrate. We live in a blessed nation. We live as a blessed people in this kingdom that we call America. But even more than that, we live as a blessed people in the kingdom of God. And so we're blessed to be together this morning. We're still working out the sound in this new system here. Bruce is working hard back there, so I want to give him kudos as we are in this moment. But this morning we're going to be talking about the next game changer. And we're going to be talking about Jonathan. Jonathan's a little different to talk about because we normally talk about David. And while we talk about David, we talk about Jonathan a little bit. And this morning, we'll be talking about Jonathan as a game changer. And what we know of David and Jonathan, friendship is the word that comes to mind. How we love each other, how we interact with each other. And there's been some friends that either for me or for my children have shaped the way we define friendship. And so you get to help name some of these if you recognize them. So the first famous friend would be, who is this? And who would be Scooby's best friend? There you go. So that one was easy. And you know, as they fought those ghostly adventures, they were always those meddling kids that figured out who was really trying to steal the show or rip people off or scare people off. And they, well, quite honestly, they never solved the crime unless they accidentally did it, right? But their friendship was dynamic as they went out in the mystery machine and did all of those things. Anybody know who that is? Sully. I thought I might get you on that one. So his best friend is Mike Wazowski. Yeah, and they had a different kind of adventure as they were trying to give their society the power of which it lived by, and they thought that was fear. But if you know the end of the movie, they learned that laughter was so much more powerful. Isn't that how we are with friends? Is that as we go through fear and we employ laughter, the depth of friendship just grows in that way. So this next one's going to challenge you a little bit, but maybe not. No? All right. Wow, I was thinking I'd only hear old folks on that. So Fonzie's best friend was? Richard, there you go. And I don't know if they were always in high school. They seemed like adults to me, but young adulthood. And whether they were with Pinky Tuscadero or whatever, I watched Happy Days growing up, but the value of friendship. And in this situation, it was two people who didn't have anything in common, and yet they had the blessing of that friendship. Anybody know who that is? Thank you. One more time, a little louder. Corey Matthews. This is Boy Meets World for those of you that have no clue. All right? And his best friend was? Sean. All right? And this is totally a high school scenario. As they did this, they came out and they remade this show with these guys as adults, and it's Girl Meets World. And again, just the ups and downs of life. What friendship does through the ups and downs of life. And I went back a long ways on this one, I think, to the 1970s. But you don't know who that is? B.J. Honeycutt. And his best friend was? I came to this one, honestly, at the end. I thought of a lot. I really like Lightning McQueen and Mater. I didn't give you that one, all right? I came to this one because this, I think, gets us closer to maybe where David and Jonathan were at. They're in war. They're in a mobile hospital unit. And the premise of the show was, how do you live in the middle of a war, seeing all of the casualties of war, those that are injured and fatally wounded, and you continually are there trying to save lives, and all you do is the war just rages on around you. And that constant struggle of of where we're at as to that. And they had to find a solace in the middle of that to make it through. And I think that brings us a whole lot to David. So I've already given this away, but do you know who that is? That's the correct part, or the decent part of the statue of David. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that to say that anyways. And I couldn't find a great picture of Jonathan that you would recognize, all right? We don't really know what he looks like. In fact, that's an artist's rendition of David. But what I want to come to you is Jonathan is a game changer. And we're going to start this morning with in the ways that many the other game changers we've looked at, and the way that they had faith in God and they were bold in their faith with God, that they did something to change the outcome. Not that they did it, but that God could use them in a very specific way, maybe on a very specific day, to make incredible things happen. So we're going to look at Jonathan, the game changer, first, and we're going to be in 1 Samuel a lot. And I'm going to scare you to death, but I'm going to really try to cover 8 chapters of 1 Samuel, all right? We're going to try to go through this pretty high level and make it through. But we start in chapter 13. In chapter 13, Saul has just become king. And in the process that it took for him to be king, for Israel to fully accept him, is that he leads the Israelites, this is 11 and 12, chapter 11, he leads them off in a great battle, and they defeat the enemy, and Israel comes together, and Samuel names Saul as king, and it's this great, incredible moment. And we get to chapter 13 of 1 Samuel, and Saul goes, you go to Gilgal, and you meet me there. I'll be there in 7 days. So Saul tries to muster up an army, and they come to this place, and they're just there for 7 days. And the problem is, while they wait for those 7 days, his army is getting more and more fearful. And they start deserting. They start hiding in caves and wherever they can hide. And basically every day that goes by, the Philistine army is growing stronger and his army is growing weaker. This is a great start for the new king of Israel, right? It's not going well. So we get to the 7th day, and he's just like, come on, Samuel, get here. And that morning, he just grows totally impatient, and he assumes, I guess, Samuel's not coming. And so he builds the altar, and he offers the sacrifice, seeking God's blessing that they might have a victory on that 7th day. Samuel shows up right after that, and he basically rebukes him. He says, Saul, what have you done? Chapter 13, verse 11. What have you done? Asked Samuel. Saul replied, when I saw that the men were scattered, and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembled at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal. And I have not sought the Lord's favor, so I felt compelled to offer a burnt offering. Samuel says, you acted foolishly. You've not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him leader of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command. He made it king for 7 days, and he blew it. It's a great start to King Saul. Now, it says he reigned 42 years, so he's going to be king for a little bit. And he blew it. He didn't get to be there. He didn't get to enjoy that. Just from the beginning, he knows somebody else is coming after him, and that his household will no longer be the lineage of the king of that nation. Jonathan is not there on this day. He's encamped with other people in other places, and we don't know when Jonathan learned maybe of Saul's demise as king. But Saul blows it, and he makes the mistake right there. But they're still out there ready to fight. And you know what? It gets even worse than that if you keep reading in chapter 13. I'm not going to read all this to you, but it turns out that they've lost all the blacksmiths and they don't have any weapons. And it literally says that the last verse of chapter 13 says, "So on the day of battle, not a soldier with Saul and Jonathan had a sword or a spear in his hand. Only Saul and his son Jonathan had them." No wonder the men are quaking. They don't even have any weapons on them. And that lays the foundation for Jonathan to show what the game changer he really is. And so, as we get into chapter 14, Jonathan takes a chance. I'll read this real quickly. Now a detachment of Philistines had gone out to the pass of Michmash. One day, Jonathan, son of Saul, said to the young man bearing his armor, "Come, let's go over to the Philistines' outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree. With him were about 600 men, among whom was Ajai, the son of Ichabod, the son of Phinehas. Verse 4, on each side of the pass, basically Jonathan's got to go through a pass to get to this outpost of the Philistines. So on each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez, and the other was Senech. One cliff stood to the north towards Michmash, the other to the south towards Geba. Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outposts of those uncircumcised fellows." So Jonathan, remember, he's one of two swords in camp, says, "Hey, let's go and let's just see what's going to happen. Let's go check it out. Let's see what the Philistines are up to." He takes a chance. And oftentimes when God does something great, somebody steps out in faith. Somebody does something that they wouldn't just naturally do, and Jonathan is that guy on this day. If you keep reading in verse 6, he says, "Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf." The first glimpse we get of Jonathan out on his own on a solo mission, and he's bringing God to the forefront right away. He's looking at maybe God's going to do something even though it's just you and I. Let's go see, let's go take a chance. And we see Jonathan's faith. We see that he is truly seeking what God might do in this perilous situation. I skipped over it, but one of the analogies of the Philistine army is that they're like the sand of the seashore. They number so many. And here we have Jonathan and an armor bearer heading to this outpost. So, the game changer part. It gets a little complicated in 8 through 15, but Jonathan said, "Come then, we will cross toward the men and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Wait there until we come to you,' we will stay there where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands." So both of them showed themselves to the Philistines. "Look," said the Philistines, the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in." The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor bearer, "Come up here to us, and we'll teach you a lesson." So Jonathan said to the armor bearer, "Climb up after me. The Lord has given them in the hand of Israel." Jonathan climbed up using his hands and his feet. It's a steep cliff. And his armor bearer right behind him. And the Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed, and he killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in the area of about a half an acre. Then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and the field, and those in the outposts and the raiding parties, and the ground shook, and it was a panic sent by God. Jonathan takes his armor bearer. They climb up this crazy cliffside just to see if they can just see what God might do in that moment. God gives them a victory. Victory of 20 men among the thousands that are there. And God uses that little moment into a massive, game-changing moment. And what I want to lay out to you is that's when we get to know Jonathan. taking the time to walk through that Jonathan is a bold guy. He's a man of faith, and he's willing to put himself out there to see what God might do through him. What God might do in his small act, even though it was just him by himself. And the faith to say, well, God can work through the many, but God can work through the few. And that's a message that I would ask you to hold on today, is that God can work through the many. When we all do great things together, great things happen. Camp Rocks is an example of that. Many people went out there and children's lives were changed. But he works through the few also. And so sometimes we are by ourselves. Sometimes it's just us and somebody else, and God's calling us to go be his people. God's calling us to go be about his business in that place. But the reality is that we don't remember Jonathan because he was a mighty warrior. We remember Jonathan because of his friendship with David. And that's where things turn from here on out. 1 Samuel 17, you know the story of 1 Samuel 17. That's David and Goliath. And it's not Jonathan who says, I'll go take on that Goliath. It's David that says, I'll go take on that Goliath. And a part of the story that I'd never realized before is that as we look at this, we have to back up to chapter 17. So I cheated. That says 1 Samuel 18 and 19, but I'm backing up to verse 17, or chapter 17. Verse 55 says, Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine. He said to Abner, commander of his army, Abner, whose son is that young man? And Abner replied, As surely as you live, O king, I don't know. The king said, Find out whose son this young man is. And as soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul. Oh, by the way, you know that he cut Goliath's head off, right? So as we come back to this, as soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine head. Kind of gross, but this is where David and Saul really have the next level conversation, all right? Saul goes, Who are you? Whose son are you? And David said, I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. And then we get into chapter 18. And after David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. David had the great victory that day, not Jonathan. And yet Jonathan loves him as himself. Friends celebrate other people's victories. Pride doesn't get in the way. We sang about that just a minute ago. Pride doesn't get in the way. That love for the friend honors and celebrates them. You have this moment where Jonathan and David come together, and Jonathan loves David. And it leads to a covenant. Verse 3, and Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic, and even his sword, his bow, and his belt. You get this beautiful moment where Jonathan is totally honoring him. Now, that wouldn't be unusual. David just had a great victory. He might still be holding Goliath's head. That's gross. I'm sorry, but he had the great victory, if you can picture this scene. And so there's gifts being given to the great warrior. But Jonathan's not doing this just as here's your gift. Thank you for saving us today. Jonathan's doing it as a covenant, a promise being kept between him and his new friend. As far as we know, they've never even interacted before this. And this instant love and friendship that comes out of it. And that leads to many other things. If you keep reading through chapter 18, you're going to see that David starts having victory after victory after victory. And he's doing great things for the kingdom of Israel. And he's having so much success that Saul starts becoming jealous of David. And though this love is between Jonathan and David, this hatred is growing between David and Saul, or between Saul and David. And we get that song of Saul has killed his thousands, but David's killed his tens of thousands. By the time we get to chapter 19, Saul's ready to kill David. And that's what happened. And we see what Jonathan does, even going to his own father. And I don't know if I laid this out well enough, but as Jonathan, as Saul's oldest, he is the prince of Israel. His father is king. And in lands where there are kings, you don't just go talk to the king any which way you want, even if you're the prince of Israel. And yet we see this scene in chapter 19, verses 1 through 7, where Jonathan takes the chance to defend his friend. Verse 19, verse 1, or chapter 19, verse 1. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. But Jonathan was very fond of David and warned him, my father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will tell you what I find out. Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul. His father said to him, let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you. What has he done? What he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do wrong to an innocent man like David by killing him for no reason? Saul listened to Jonathan and took on this oath, as surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. So Jonathan called David and told him the whole conversation. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. Jonathan takes a chance. He's defying the order of the king. And you don't just defy the order of the king. For those of you, I think in the Bible classes, they just went over a story a week or two ago about Jonathan eating honey despite his father ordering a fasting while they fought a battle. And Jonathan eats the honey, and when the men tell King Saul Jonathan ate the honey, King Saul is ready to kill his own son Jonathan because he defied the king's order. And if it weren't for the armies, the people there saying, no, don't do this to Jonathan, don't kill your own son, he didn't know about it, he was just trying to lead us into victory, Saul backs off. Saul's already been ready to kill his own son. And yet, so on this day, he takes the chance. Saul listens to him. Saul backs off. He loves David that much to take that chance of not knowing what his father's response would be. And in this passage, he's still celebrating that victory. He's reminding his father, you remember when he killed the Philistine? You were glad on that day. Let us continue to celebrate what God is doing through him for our nation. And Saul listens. Oh, by the way, verse 9, I'm not going to read it, but it says the evil spirit takes over. This is the next verse after he's loving David again. And Saul's right back at the hatred towards David. And in chapter 19, it's the scene where Saul gets so angry at David that he throws the spear at him. David escapes with the help of Michal. He's got it, David's in good at least. He's got Saul's daughter, Saul's son, and they're both helping him as they get to that point. And really the chapter 20 is the chapter that we know of with Jonathan and David. It's the whole scene of Jonathan's ultimate work to prove his friendship to David, even though he's doubting the motives of his father, to prove his friendship to David, and ultimately keeping David totally safe. And as we get to the end of chapter 20, there's a beautiful scene where it's probably the last time Jonathan and David are even together, as this beauty of this friendship, of this covenant relationship that they have has come together. We got to get there. So, again, David's on the run. Saul's throwing a spear at him. He barely gets away. He uses his wife Michal as a help to that. And the next chapter, David goes looking for Jonathan. Like, you told me we were good. You told me that your dad was not going to try to kill me, and here we are again. So David fled from Noath to Ramah, and he went to Jonathan and asked, what have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father, that he is trying to take my life? Never, Jonathan replied. You are not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything great or small without confiding in me. Why would he hide this from me? It's not so. But David took an oath and said, your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said to himself, Jonathan must not know this, or he will be grieved. Yet as surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, there is only one step between me and death. Only one step between me and death. Jonathan said to David, whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. David's in a bad place. He just feels like death is right there. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where to turn. It shook him up that Saul threw that spear at him. It's like, what happens now? And he goes to Jonathan, the one solace that he can have. And he's like, what's going on? He's right there. And Jonathan, I almost remember maybe the love in his eyes. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. When we have a friend in a hurting kind of way, what other response do we have? We love them. What do you need? I'll try to do it. I'll be there. I'll do what I can. So Jonathan answers David after this attack, this rebuke, and he says, basically, there towards the end, he says, as he's answering David, he says, never, Jonathan said, if I ever had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you? David asked, who will tell me if your father answers you harshly? Come, Jonathan said, let's go out into the field. So they went there together. Then Jonathan said to David, by the Lord, the God of Israel, I will surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed towards you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father, but show me unfailing kindness like that of the Lord, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. Jonathan makes this promise to him, that even if it means his own father might kill him, again, he's taking that chance, that he will love David through the process of that. That he is answering David's question, are you really going to be my friend? And Jonathan wholeheartedly says, yes, I will go before my father and I will do that. In strong words like, never will I let you down. Never will I forsake you. This is the promise that we live in accord with. In verse 14 through 17, he renews the covenant. He says, but show me unfailing kindness like that of the Lord, as long as I live, so that I might not be killed. And do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord call David's enemies to account. And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself. This covenant of love, he's talking more beyond just their friendship in this moment. He's talking all the way until David becomes king. And what happens in the reality of a kingship is that when a new family takes over, when a new king takes over, they kill all of the descendants of the previous king. And he's making this covenant with David that when you come into your kingdom, when you come into your authority, remember my family, remember me. Remember this covenant between you. Well, in the way the story goes, just to kind of jump to that end real quick, King Saul and his 3 sons, they all die in battle. David's not there. Saul falls on his own sword. David truly mourns the loss of Saul and Jonathan and that kingdom. And there's no one left except there's a son of Jonathan, Mishbosheth. I'm not saying that correctly. In the hurry to get out, he's dropped and he's paralyzed and he's just there. And David, many years later, remembers this covenant, and he has Mephibosheth come and live in his house and give him a special place, that he remembers that covenant forever. They renew that covenant there. And then Jonathan saves David's life. You guys know the story. Real quickly, I'm just going to walk through this idea that, they come to the new moon festival's going on. So David says, I'm supposed to be there, and you're going to judge whether your father's really going to kill me or not by the fact that I'm not there and how he reacts to it. So the first day of the new moon festival, King Saul realizes David's not there, and he goes, maybe you had a good excuse not to be here. The second day of the new moon festival, King Saul says, David's not here. Hey, Jonathan, what's going on with this boy David? Why is he not here? And they'd worked out a plan. They were going to say, well, he went to go be with family in Bethlehem because there's a special sacrifice going on. And Saul's anger goes through the roof. And he even accuses Jonathan of being the son of an ungrateful woman. He attacks him by even his mother. And as they're back and forth for just a moment in that, as you keep reading in chapter 20, that Saul eventually hurls a spear at Jonathan to kill Jonathan. And this angers Jonathan. Jonathan gets out of there. And so, the plan is the next morning, after he understands truly the intent of that he's worked out a plan that David's going to be in hiding. He's going to have a boy with him, and he's going to shoot arrows, like at a target. And if it's safe, then he'll tell the boy, come closer to me. The arrows are closer to you. And if it's not safe, he's going to tell the boy, go further. Because it's so dangerous that even the boy can't know that David is out there hiding in the woods. And so that morning, he shoots the arrows. The boy goes out after the arrows to retrieve them. And as he's approaching, he goes, no, you got to go further. The arrows are further. Keep going. You got to go further. The boy collects the arrows and then comes back. In verse 41, after the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed down before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sown friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying the Lord is witness between you and me and between your descendants and my descendants forever. Then David left and Jonathan went back to the town. If you were going to have the last moment with a friend, what would you say? I did watch a little bit of Forrest Gump getting ready for this because Forrest Gump has a lot of friendships with Bubba. And there's a scene where he carries Bubba out of the war zone and Bubba's hit bad. And he's sitting there on by this water and he says to Bubba, he's Forrest Gump in the movie. If you've watched the movie, he's commentating the movie as it goes along. And right before he speaks in the moment, he says in the commentating voice, if I would have known this was the last time I was going to see Bubba, I would have had something more profound to say. And he says, Bubba, hey, Forrest. And there's this moment there. The big question, why'd this have to happen? You got shot. David and Jonathan in this moment, they're going to go on their ways. Who knows what's going to happen? Saul's tried to kill Jonathan. Saul's tried to kill David. They're going to go on their ways. But if you had that last moment, what would you say? As far as we know, Jonathan and David aren't ever together again. David spends the next maybe 35 years on the run. If Saul served 42, how early is this in the process? He spends that whole time on the run avoiding Saul because Saul just keeps trying to kill him and trying to kill him. And we don't know that David and Jonathan ever came back. But you see, Jonathan is a game changer, not because of a great victory at Michmash. Jonathan is a game changer because of the way he loved his friend David. It's friendship that actually makes him the game changer. Friendship is what game changers do, is what I want to say to you. You know, in our world, we're getting more and more isolated. Quite honestly, brothers and sisters, friendship doesn't happen through social media. Friendship doesn't happen through, I want to say, even text. Although there's a reason for texting, right? Friendship requires time. Friendship requires togetherness. Friendship requires tears and laughter, hardship and heartache, and hard conversations. And when our friends do something great, we celebrate that with them. Because it's not about us, it's about them. And we say truth. We speak truth to our friends. We keep them safe. We keep them from bad decisions. We keep them seeking the Lord. Friendship is hard. That's what God's calling us to, that there's a horizontal relationship going on in the way that we love each other. The greatest command is to love God. The second greatest command is to love each other horizontally. So many times do we not react? Do we not take on that? Especially in the day and age that we live in with our phones and social media and those kind of things. Brothers and sisters, we need to be together. I think we learned that in the last few years. We need to be together, but not just in an auditorium like this. We need to be together in our lives. And so I just encourage you that if we want to be the game changer God is calling us to, it has a lot to do with spending quality time with those we love, those that love us. So I want to encourage you that wherever you're at, maybe you already do this a whole lot, but don't be afraid to answer the call. But more importantly, don't be afraid to make the call. Don't be afraid to drive over and knock on a door, because anymore it doesn't seem like we got to give everybody 4 warnings before we knock on their door. Don't be afraid to knock on the door. Oh, how that has changed the lives of people in this room when somebody took the challenge to go knock on the door because they knew hardship was there. Let us love like Jesus loved. Above all, he thought of us, and that is the calling to us, to love others as he's loved us. He's called us higher in the way that we ought to react and love one another. Please be prayerful of that as we sing, You've Called.